That 1930s guy here, continuing my videos of this beautiful city of Chicago on the blue waters of Lake Michigan on a mild winter day today, about 50 degrees here in Chicago in the middle of February. Not bad. But anyway, Chicago. For a long time, much of its existence, it was the second largest city in America. Passed by Los Angeles, I believe, in the 60s, but still, it was called for a long time, I guess it still can be called, America's second city, New York being the first. But why did Chicago, why did this gigantic city start in this particular spot on the southwestern bottom portion of Lake Michigan? Why this? Why not some other area of the Great Lakes? Why did this spot grow into this gigantic metropolis? Well, I'll tell you why, as I stand in front of the Adler Planetarium on Northern Island, which is not an island anymore, it's a peninsula. But anyway, there's a good reason why the city built here. Is because this particular spot was the closest the Great Lakes came to the Mississippi water system. In fact, when they first started settling here, they were quick to notice that there's only 6 short miles between the Chicago River, which dumps into the Lake Michigan here, and the Des Plaines River, which flows into Illinois River, which flows into the Mississippi. So this was the ideal spot to connect the two and have a gigantic waterway connection between the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf. But they needed a canal. And you're saying, what does this have to do with the 1930s? This canal was built a long time ago in the early 19th century. Well, I'll tell you. Because it was in the 30s that this canal died. The canal that built Chicago. The reason for its very existence as a major city was officially put out of business in 1933. So I think it's appropriate to talk about this canal and the waterways of Chicago, which really made this city where it is today and what it is today. And I'll give you one more look at that beautiful on this wonderful day. It's a great story. You'll want to listen to this. You're going to learn how Chicago came to be Chicago. I am now at the Des Plaines River. The French would probably be abhorred to hear it pronounced that way, because originally, of course, the French word should be pronounced Des Plaines. But the Anglicization of it is it's now Des Plaines. Des Plaines. Well, anyway, here's this river. This is at the town of Willow Springs. And I'm going to further discuss the importance of this body of water we're looking at right here. I'm on a bike overpass. The river level's pretty high because we just had a recent rainstorm. It lasted about 24 hours. But anyway, this is a very important river because it eventually leads to the Illinois River, which leads to the Mississippi River. So it's part of the Mississippi system, but it's the part of it that gets closest to Lake Michigan, which, it gets close to the Chicago River, which leads to very short river, which leads to Lake Michigan. And this is why Chicago really was born, because they knew back even in the late 18th century that this was going to be the best spot to connect the Great Lakes with the Mississippi system. And the key was getting to the Des Plaines River. The only problem was that it was kind of rocky at the beginning. The Des Plaines River In its beginning, it's parts of it that are too shallow, parts of it that were were like rapids, and the ships couldn't get through. It also fluctuates a great deal between periods of dry weather and wet weather. So they needed a canal to get past the early parts so they can get to the later parts of the river where it was more navigable for ships. And so this necessitated building a canal, which plans were being made as early as the 1790s, but real concrete workable plans didn't come till like the 1820s. This is the sad remnants of the once essentially important Illinois and Michigan Canal. The canal that built Chicago. The canal that made Chicago a major city. Now, just looks like a little creek, but and in actual stretches of it, there aren't. It's completely dried up. You don't even see the water anymore. But as I stand on this bridge in Willow Creek, and I apologize for the noise, it's kind of a busy road, but it's such a good vantage point, and it's also one of the better preserved stretches of this very old canal. So old, it was started in 1824. After years of talking about it and planning, they finally began production or construction of this creek. And you can actually see downtown Chicago really far in the distance, but it's kind of hard to see. We're pretty far away. I don't know if you can see those buildings back there, but way back there. But yeah, that's Chicago right there. It'll take you right to it. But actually, a lot of stretches are completely dried up, so they don't even really exist anymore. This is one of the wider, better preserved, like I said, sections of it. But yeah, it started in 1824. There was a bit of a hiccup with the Panic of 1837, where they ran out of money for a little while. Yeah, they had depressions back then too, and so they had to stop. They resumed 1840s, and they were able to finish the canal in 1848. And as you look at it now, there's fallen trees you see there. The canal, you can tell, is not very deep anymore. But when they originally finished it, it was 6 feet deep and 60 feet wide. I guess the width is not too different from this section, but it's definitely not 6 feet deep anymore. The sediment has filled it up. But this was a very heavily used waterway for a very long time. And originally, the canal flowed into Lake Michigan, and that eventually became a problem. And I'll discuss that in a little bit. Now, as I walk a little further to the north, on the same bridge, we come to the Sanitary and Ship Canal. Now, what does that mean? Well, there started to become a bit of a problem around the late 19th century. As Chicago was rebuilding after the Great Fire of 1871. Now, you could still... The I&M Canal is just past those trees over there. It's not too far away. Just to give you a sense of the location. And the Des Plaines River is just ahead over here. I'll walk towards it. You can see the sign in a minute. But this canal wasn't originally this wide. I'll get into that in a little bit. But as I said, the city was building fast, and the canal dumped into Lake Michigan. So And on its way there, you had to pass a bunch of factories. And there's still factories down there, you can see. But back then there were much dirtier factories, and probably many more than maybe today, but it's not as it used to be here. But in the late 19th century, a lot of pollution was entering Lake Michigan. Not just industrial pollution, but human pollution, human waste. And something had to be done about this, because that's what Lake Michigan was the drinking water supply of the city. So in the late, about 1890s, they decided to build a new canal. Not only build a new canal next to it, but to reverse the flow of the canal. So instead of going into Lake Michigan, it would flow the other way and go dump into the Des Plaines River and eventually to the Mississippi River. So it was a real engineering feat. It took about 10 years, and they were able to build this other canal and connect it with the Calumet River, which I'm going to take you next on this journey here. And here, as I walk, we are now heading a little even further north, and we are at the Des Plaines River, which is right there. So you have the Des Plaines River, and then the Sanitary and Ship Canal, and then the I&M Canal, heading north to south. And in 1900, they finally were able to open the Sanitary and Ship Canal. And oh wow, there's actually a ship on it. All right, watch this. So they still use this, as you can see. This ship, I'm not sure what they're hauling here. It says dangerous cargo. Wow. This is a real treat, folks. That sign, you can't really see it now. It says dangerous cargo. This is the Chicago Trader, headed towards Lake Michigan from parts unknown. Back says it's from the port of Jeffersonville, Indiana. So it's definitely going to Lake Michigan for sure. Who knows what's carrying? Whatever it is dangerous, apparently. But let's go a little bit further downstream from these three bodies of water here, flowing bodies of water, and we'll go further into the importance of this canal and the stories around it. Here is a even more pathetic looking section of the old I&M Canal. Actually, this is one of the very last sections until it completely disappears. But this is a little bit downstream to the southwest, the very last location. We have right here the Sanitary and Ship Canal, and just past those woods is the Des Plaines River. This is close to where it connects with the Cal-Seg Canal, an important feeder to this system, and let's see if I could take you there right now. Now here, just a little bit to the south, quarter mile to the south of where I just was, is the Calumet-Sag Canal. This section of it was completed in the 1890s when they were building the Sanitary and Ship Canal to help feed the canal and also help to push it towards the Mississippi waterway, so it would no longer dump into Lake Michigan and pollute it and pollute the drinking water of the city. Now, there wasn't any epidemics or anything caused by the pollution that dumped into Lake Michigan, but they knew eventually this was going to happen because the city just kept growing and growing and growing. Here's the other side heading towards Lake Michigan, and they actually did have a connection to the I&M Canal before this from the actual Calumet River, which is another small river like the Chicago River, which connects, which flows into Lake Michigan, and but they made a much longer canal to stretch it over to here, where it would connect with the Sanitary and Ship Canal right past this railroad bridge here, if you can see it. And just past that, it connects with the Des Plaines River. And so while in the beginning the Calumet River and the smaller connection they built in the 19th century helped to push the water into Lake Michigan, it now does the opposite. And I guess they really didn't care about the people downstream in the Mississippi that were now getting all the waste. But anyway, it helped the city of Chicago. And this was also changed in the 1930s. And I'm going to get into what happened in the early 30s to these water systems in just a minute. Now, back at the Sanitary and Ship Canal, just to the north of where I just was. Hope this isn't confusing anybody, but I just want to get all these segments of this interesting system of water together. Here you can see where the Calumet-Sag Canal hits the Sanitary and Ship Canal from the Ship Canal side. And if you look over here, you can actually see Willis Tower, the old Sears Tower, right there in the distance, that building in the background. But anyway, when they built the Sanitary and Ship Canal, part of the reason, besides reversing the flow, which I should also say was done by blocking the or damming up the Chicago River at where it dumps into Lake Michigan. That's another part of the way they were able to switch the flow. But anyway, they did it because they needed to make it wider for the larger ships of the day. And this held true even more so later in the century, in the 20th century. In the 1920s, they realized they needed to make the canal even bigger in order to accommodate the even larger ships that they were now using this waterway. Now we're getting to the part where the 1930s comes in, because as the 20th century went on, the ships that used the system only got bigger, and they needed to make the canal even wider than it was. So that was another part of the reason they had to undergo another project. And this started in the early Hoover administration, actually. It was one of his projects. It's actually planned before that. I'm not sure if it started, but it was planned during the 20s. But Hoover, who took office right as the Depression was beginning, turned it into a bigger project in order to employ more people in the Chicago area. So, Hoover, he did do some New Deal-like projects. He did expand public works, just not as much as it as Roosevelt did with the New Deal, but he had his own attempts to create some employment. The Hoover Dam, that's one of the projects that Hoover did. That's why they call it the Hoover Dam. But this also was a project that was done, and it was very extensive. They pretty much had to remake the sanitary and ship canal. They also had to build new locks that needed to be modernized. They needed a large system of locks because of the pretty steep drop in elevation which occurs from the beginning of the canal to where it dumps into the Des Plaines River, which is right near where I am right now. And this is the Des Plaines River in this section I've been filming from, close where it hits the Kalmtz-Seg Canal. This is, of course, the natural part of this system, the Des Plaines River, which actually begins in Wisconsin and flows down into Illinois, and then it flows south into Illinois, and then turns to the west and goes into the Illinois River. Now, one of the funny complaints people made, it turned out to be just part of their imagination, but people thought when they switched the flow of the canal from dumping into Lake Michigan into the Mississippi, there was some people who thought that that this was actually lowering the level of all the Great Lakes, especially Lake Michigan, and they were pushing to again turn it around the other way. And these complaints started in the 1910s, and then even in the 1930s, you still read people writing letters to the newspapers complaining that the Lake Michigan is going down, and that eventually it's going to drain the Great Lakes. It was blown way out of proportion. It turns out this was not really the case. The Great Lakes, they fluctuate decade to decade. Sometimes they get bigger, sometimes they get smaller, and it really had nothing to do with this canal, though a lot of people thought that it did. Like it was somebody unplugged the bathtub and it was all draining out, but it's just, like I said, it was all in their imagination. Now I'll end this video here at the Sanitary and Ship Canal, the part that was, like I said, built, or I should say rebuilt and improved upon in the early 1930s in an early Depression project to help relieve unemployment. At least that was a partial reason. Here's a little opening I found. It was actually right under the bridge I was just filming on. You can see some of the construction blocks built from the Hoover administration funding project. But the real underlying thing I wanted to point out was the importance of the I&M Canal in building Chicago, and this whole waterway that still exists today, still an important part of the city. And like I said in the very beginning, the I&M Canal was still in use up until the 1930s. That is when it officially shut down as a waterway. Of course, it was this body of water here was the main artery immediately after it was completed in 1900. But the I&M Canal was still used by smaller boats until 1933, when the improvement project was done. They officially closed down the long-standing I&M, the canal that originally built Chicago. And It marked an end of a very long and successful era for that canal, which was quite a project built over, because of the Panic of 1837. It took about 20 years for it to be finished, over 20 years. And it's an important part of Chicago history that often gets overlooked, I think, in its great importance. And I hope you enjoyed hearing the story of how it all came together through these different waterways, and you were able to keep up with the different geographic spots I was showing. Thank you for watching. Of course, if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and look for more videos, not only from Chicago, but other places in the country about the 1930s, the most interesting decade of the 20th century, in my opinion. Thanks for watching.